Check this out. BCM Raider here, bringing you another Commander deck tech. Today we're looking at Una, Queen of the Fae. This is a Dimir combo control build. It's very streamlined, it's very quick, it's a very fun deck. So, let's get right into it. First up, we're going to look at all the instants. This is going to be a very reactive deck. So we're going to want to control basically everything that our opponents are doing. That way we can win the game very quickly. But I'll touch on how exactly we're going to be doing that. So first up is Dark Ritual. Because when you need 3 mana real quick, Dark Ritual is going to deliver that for you. Now we have Brainstorm. That way we can select very certain spells. We have Mystical Tutor, so we can go get whatever instant or sorcery we want. Then Pyrrhic Tutor. We're going to lose 2 life, but we're going to search for any card that we want and put that card on top of our library. Now we have Frantic Search. That way we can draw 2 cards, then we discard 2 cards, but we untap 3 lands, which is going to be very powerful. And because black and blue kind of has a hard time dealing with enchantments, I think this is a auto include from here on out for any color that plays black is Withering Torment. You can destroy a creature or a enchantment. Now let's get into the counter spells. Of course, we have Arcane Denial, an offer you can't refuse, Pact of Negation. You do have to be very careful with Pact of Negation because you have to pay that 5 mana during your upkeep. If you don't, you lose the game. So just be aware of that. Now we have what I think is a very underutilized, underappreciated counterspell with Muddle the Mixture. It can counter a instant or sorcery card, but more importantly, it has Transmute. So you can pay 3, discard Muddle the Mixture, and search your library for any card with mana cost 2. And majority of our very powerful spells will cost 2. This is going to help us out really, really nicely. Now we have the Iconic Mana Drain. This is a very powerful counter spell. You're going to counter the spell, and then at the beginning of your next main phase, you're going to add a amount of colorless mana equal to the countered spell's mana cost. Now we have Flusterstorm. Flusterstorm is going to help you win those counter battles. Now we have the Iconic Counterspell. 2 mana, counter target spell. Now we have Force of Negation. This is a very powerful counter spell as well. Now we have a spicy one. We have Fairy Trickery. This does cost 3, but it'll exile the spell when it's countered, assuming it's a non-fairy spell. 99% of the spells you're going to be countering aren't fairies, so we're not going to worry too much about that. Now we have Narcissus Reversal. This is a very universal spell. You can use this to copy another player's counter spell, or you can use this to copy a very powerful spell that you've cast, and you will return the original spell back to your hand. And now we have Cyclonic Rift. Don't really need to say much more about this card. Now we have Blue Sun Zenith. We're going to use Blue Sun Zenith in many different ways, but primarily this is here as a infinite mana win condition. So once we generate infinite mana, we're going to force our opponents to draw their entire deck. Now we have 3 very specific instants that are only here for specific combos. So we have Dramatic Reversal. This is only here for Isochron Scepter because when you imprint Dramatic Reversal on Isochron Scepter, if you have any kind of artifact that produces mana, you're going to produce infinite mana. Now we have Tainted Pact and Demonic Consultation. These two cards are only here for Thassa's Oracle. Okay, let's get into the sorceries. Most of these sorceries are just going to be either tutor effects or ways to deal with our opponent's stuff. So first up is Demonic Tutor. Really doesn't need any more introduction. 2 mana, go get whatever card you want. Now we have Ponder for a early game cantrip. That way we can set up our hand. Preordain. We're going to scry 2, then draw. Now we have Grim Tutor. Kind of like Demonic Tutor, except you lose 3 life. Now we have Windfall. It's going to allow us to have a whole new hand, and it's going to disrupt our opponent's hands. If we have a very specific Planeswalker, it gets even more grievous. Now we have Feed the Swarm. As I previously stated, enchantments are very difficult for black and blue to deal with, and the fact that we have access to 2 different spells that deal with enchantments now is very important. And to deal with all the creatures, we have a lot of mass removal. So here's the Iconic Damnation, Toxic Deluge, which is probably the best mass removal in black. Now we have Black Sun Zenith. I really like Black Sun Zenith because it shuffles itself back in after it's cast. That's assuming it wasn't countered. Now we got a spicy one. We have Decree of Pain. This is going to destroy all creatures. They can't be regenerated, but we're going to draw a card for each creature discarded this way. But if you need it earlier, you can cycle this for 5 and give all creatures -2/-2. Now we have 2 very specific payoffs in case we produce infinite mana. So we have Exsanguinate. That way all our opponents will lose X life and we gain X life. Now we have an even scarier one with Torment of Hailfire. We're going to repeat this process X times. So, like I said, if we produce infinite mana, we're going to repeat this process infinite number of times. Each opponent is going to lose 3 life unless they sacrifice a non-land permanent or discard. So these are 3 really bad options for your opponents. Okay, let's get into the Planeswalkers. There's only 3. First up is Jace, Wielder of Mysteries. This is very similar to the Thassa's Oracle ability. If you would draw a card from your library, if there's no cards in your library, you win the game. Now we have Narset, Parter of Veils. This is going to hinder our opponents from drawing additional cards that they can use against us. And if we -2, we get to look at the top 4 cards, and we get to put a non-creature, non-land card from among those 4 into our hand, and the rest go on the bottom. This is the Planeswalker that's going to pair very nicely with Windfall. And to make it even worse for them, we have Ashiok Dream Render. I love this card. For 3 mana, it turns off your opponent's abilities to search their library. So it shuts down fetch lands, any kind of tutor effect, anything like that. But also, if you minus Ashiok, you can mill your opponents for 4 cards, and then they're going to exile their graveyard. And that's really powerful, especially if they have some kind of reanimator effect. Okay, let's get into the artifacts. There are a lot of mana rocks because we want as much fast mana as possible. So we have Mox Opal, we have our Mana Vault, we have our Soul Ring, we have our Arcane Signet, we have our Talisman of Dominance, we have our Dimir Signet, we have our Thought Vessel, because we're going to be drawing lots of cards as well. So we're going to want to keep those cards in our hand. Now we have Mind Stone. If you don't need the mana from Mind Stone, you can just pay one, sacrifice it, and draw a card. Now we have Commander Sphere. Now we have Basalt Monolith. This is a very unique mana rock because it'll produce 3 colorless mana, but more importantly, it has pay 3, untap Basalt Monolith. We're going to use this specific artifact with another very specific artifact, which will produce us infinite colorless mana. But I'll get to that in just a second. Now we have Thran Dynamo. I feel that Thran Dynamo is a little bit underplayed in Commander. It does cost 4 mana, but you're getting 3 colorless. It's not a bad mana rock. Now we have Gilded Lotus. This has always been a very efficient mana rock because it'll produce 3 of one color. Now we have Sensei's Divining Top. With Sensei's Top, we get to activate it, look at the top 3 cards of our library, and put them back in any order. And if there's a very specific spell that we put on top, we can activate the top to draw that card. Now to deal with our opponent's graveyards, we have Nile Spellbomb. All we have to do is pay 1 when we activate this, and we get to draw a card on top of exiling our opponent's graveyard. Now we have a personal favorite of mine with Elixir of Immortality, because we're going to want to continually keep these spells in our library, and we're going to be gaining life. So the fact we're going to keep shuffling our graveyard back in is going to be very beneficial for us. Okay, here's the 3 very powerful artifacts that are going to be basically our combo enablers. So we have Rings of Brighthearth. This is the artifact that we're going to use with Basalt Monolith to create infinite mana. Now we have Isochron Scepter. This is what we're going to imprint Dramatic Reversal with. Now we have Bolas's Citadel. We're going to use our life total to play lands and cast spells from the top of our library. That's why Sensei's Divining Top is going to be very, very powerful with Bolas's Citadel. Okay, let's get into the enchantments. First up is Mystic Remora. This is going to help us fill our hand very early in the game. Now we have Rhystic Study. This doesn't really need too much introduction either. Whenever an opponent casts a spell, we get to draw a card unless they pay 1 colorless mana. Now we have Counterbalance. Counterbalance is going to synergize very well with Sensei's Divining Top, because the top is going to allow us to rearrange our top 3 cards. So whenever a opponent casts a spell, if we have that same mana cost on top of our library, that spell is countered. Unless the spell specifically states that spell can't be countered. But more times than not, we're going to be able to counter those spells. And if our opponents have a lot of creatures that want to attack us, we're playing Propaganda. We're going to tax them for each creature they want to attack us with by forcing them to pay 2 colorless for each attacking creature. And just for funsies, we have Shark Typhoon, because we're playing a lot of non-creature spells. We might as well generate some kind of threat. And what better threat than a bunch of flying blue sharks? Okay, let's get into the creatures. There's only 5 total creatures in the entire deck, but each one of these creatures has a very specific role. So, first up is Thassa's Oracle. This is our single-handed, we win the game on the spot. Similar to that, we have Laboratory Maniac, because we're running Thassa's Oracle, Laboratory Maniac, and Jace, Wielder of Mysteries. That's 3 separate threats of winning the game on the spot. And in case our opponents really like drawing cards, we have Notion Thief. Notion Thief is a mean card, but it's very powerful. If a opponent would draw a card, except the first one he or she draws, we draw that card instead. And like I said before, if our opponents like searching, we have Opposition Agent. This is going to get even worse if we have Ashiok 2. So with Ashiok being out as well, it's going to prevent our opponents from searching entirely. And if they deal with being able to search and we have Opposition Agent out, we're going to control the search anyway. And if our opponent likes creating lots of tokens or smaller creatures or just a lot of creatures in general, we have Toxrill the Corrosive. This is a disgusting magic card. It's already a 7/7, but every single end step, we're going to put a -1 counter on it. So if the counter doesn't kill the creature right out, it's going to get gradually smaller. And when any creature goes to the graveyard that has a slime counter on it, we're going to create a 1/1 slug token. And we can use these slugs by paying a black and a blue to draw cards. This card is insane. Okay, let's get into the land base. First up is Command Tower, Polluted Delta, Misty Rainforest, Fable Passage. Now we have our Shock Land with Watery Grave, our Surveil Land with Undercity Sewers. We have our Battle for Zendikar land with Sunken Hollow. Now we have Fetid Pools. If we don't need this, we can just cycle it. Now we have our Battle Bond land with Morphic Pool. Now we have our Verges with Gloom Lake Verge. These Duskmourn Verge lands, I feel, are way better than what the Tainted lands used to be. Now we have our Filter land with Sunken Ruins. We have our Choked Estuary. Our Shipwreck Marsh. Okay, now we got a fun one. We have River of Tears. This will add a blue mana on its own, but if we played a land this turn, it'll produce a black mana instead. Now we have our Scryland with Temple of Deceit. Our Painland with Underground River. Now we have our choice of blue or black mana with Clearwater Pathway. Now we have some utility lands with Bajuka Bog, so we can exile our opponent's graveyards. Now we have Halmar Depths. This is kind of like Ponder. When Halmar Depths enters the battlefield, we get to look at the top 3 cards and put them back in any order. Now we have Castle Vantress. That way we can scry 2 whenever we want. Okay, now we got a powerful one with Mystic Sanctuary. If we control 3 or more other islands, Mystic Sanctuary will enter untapped, and when it does, we get to put a target instant or sorcery back on top of our library. Now, we have Reliquary Tower, because, like I said before, we like drawing lots of cards, and we want to keep those cards in our hand. Now we have a unique one with Lotus Field. We're not going to worry too much about sacrificing 2 other lands for the simple fact of Lotus Field is going to produce a bunch of mana for us. Now we have 6 islands and 5 swamps. And that was the Commander deck tech for Una, Queen of the Fae. I really hope you guys enjoyed this deck tech. If you guys have any suggestions for some other powerful spells that might work a little better, let me know in the comments below. I'll post the Mox Field link in the comments for the entire deck list to this deck tech. So be sure to like, comment, subscribe, follow me on TikTok, share these videos, and I'll see you guys in the next one.